on. Okay, so how many people here have heard of NIM? Anyone? Okay, how many people here use a VPN? Okay, so what we're producing is a sort of decentralized super VPN, which is even resistant to NSA-level surveillance. Now, what most people don't know is that we actually have a IBC-enabled, CosmoWasm-enabled Cosmos blockchain called Nix running beneath it. So the internet's broken. It's been broken since the beginning because it was designed for a trusted academic environment. And essentially, whenever you access the internet, your IP address and the timing and volume of every single packet you send, who you're talking to, what website you're going to, what Telegram group you're in, what blockchain you're talking to is sort of public by design, is just out there for anyone to gather. So for example, I was in New York last weekend at a crypto conference. I met someone who worked for Consensus, whose previous job was at the NSA. And he basically said, I don't care if you're using zero-knowledge proofs on-chain because we have many other sources of data, such as, for example, IP addresses, that we will use to identify you. So he basically concurs with us at NIM that most zero-knowledge blockchains or SGX blockchains like Secret or Nomada, they all have a fundamental, what you would call Achilles heel, which is that essentially they don't actually offer privacy unless you offer privacy not just at the blockchain level, but on the level beneath. And this also goes for VPNs and Tor. So what we produced is we produced a decentralized, incentivized mixnet. I'll describe what that means in a second, but it has a token attached to incentivize the nodes to hide and mix the traffic. And we run a blockchain to coordinate all the nodes. And we have some cool zero-knowledge tech I'll explain shortly that helps you use the blockchain privately. So the way you want to think about what a mixnet is that traditionally with a VPN, your traffic is sort of like a fingerprint that uniquely identifies you. The packets have different sizes, different volumes. They go into a big centralized server, and then they come out, and honestly, like the server knows exactly what you're doing, and anyone that's watching either side of the server also can identify you. So VPNs, maybe they offer some mild censorship resistance against very weak adversaries, but they don't really protect you in any meaningful sense. Tor is a bit better. Tor effectively operates a decentralized VPN. So how many people here have used Tor? Anyone use Tor here? Tornado Cash users? Anyways, it's a great system, but it's still not super private because you can see that this kind of digital fingerprint is preserved. So while a single node can't easily de-anonymize you, like as the case with a centralized VPN, the fact of the matter is that anyone that's watching your entry and exit traffic can de-anonymize you. NIM is a mixnet, so you can see the packets, they come in, different shapes and sizes, different volumes, different timings. They get shuffled, mixed up like a deck of cards between different servers, and they come out anonymized, all the same, with the same kind of traffic pattern, all the same size at the other end. So that's a much stronger level of privacy so even if like the NSA is watching every single packet, or I don't know who else you're worried about, Chainalysis, Consensus, so forth and so on, they can't tell what you're doing. And that we think is pretty cool. And how users will use NIM in the future, we're going to announce this towards the end of the year, is we're basically going to try to make it as easy to use as a normal VPN. So we currently have a testing product called NIM Connect, but we're going to try to get something that works better on mobile, on iOS, so forth and so on, that essentially takes in regular payments, because many people pay for VPNs, and converts it to NIM tokens to reward the mixed nodes. We think that's a really nice feature. We can explain a little bit more later. And the reason that's a nice feature is because we have a Cosmos blockchain beneath NIM. And it's a little complicated, but I'll walk everyone through it. So I'm a user, and I would like to access the internet my blockchain of choice, Osmosis, whatever, Atom, we don't care, Ethereum, we're completely neutral. And we hope we could integrate against other blockchains like Zcash, Secret, and Namada in the future. We are agnostic to your L1 of choice. And what you do is you send your packets into the mixed network, but you have to, in order to show that you are a user, that you've paid for access, you show a little credential. And we'll explain these credentials in a second. And so you pay, the tokens give you a credential, and the tokens then go to a pool, a bit like what we call the mix mining pool, a pool of rewards in a smart contract. And then those tokens are then, after you've sent a bunch of packets to the network, used to reward, that's the little orange ends, the various players in the network, in particular the servers that are mixing traffic. And this network is live now. You can make a server, you can get NIM rewards for mixing traffic literally right now. And so what we do is the problem is that we have all of these different nodes, and we need to know which nodes are offline versus which nodes are online. If a node is off all the time, then you don't want to be sending your packets to it because you'll lose packets. If a node has high uptime, high availability, good quality of service, it's mixing the packets properly, then we want to give them more rewards. So we do this by using Cosmos as an app chain. In effect, the app chain runs CosmWasm, which we're quite big fans of, and we have a mixnet contract, and that mixnet contract identifies all the mixed nodes in the system, because remember, we keep users anonymous, but the infrastructure itself is transparent. And so the mixed nodes, their topology, where they lay in the network, what their reputation is in terms of NIM tokens, and their various kind of like key material and IP address, you can find them on the internet and communicate with them, is all kept on a Cosmos blockchain. For those of you that are familiar with Tor, this replaces an Achilles heel in Tor called the directory authority. This is the centralized authority that tells you where Tor nodes are. And it also replaces, essentially, we're using a blockchain to replace the centralized database of a VPN, like ExpressVPN or Molvad. So there's no centralized database keeping track of all the nodes that are kind of in your VPN. There's a decentralized blockchain. And it also has a nice kind of censorship resistance. So, if you can't get a copy easily of the blockchain data, you can always kind of gossip it. And we have a vesting contract as well for people that are getting vesting. And so it's a pretty cool blockchain. We call it Nix. And we're trying currently to develop a kind of DAO on top of it to reward developers automatically, somewhat similar to Canto. That's called GitSplit. That's not launched yet. But what I'm going to concentrate on in this talk for my remaining time is how we're using what we call ZK NIMs, a new zero-knowledge solution, to basically keep access to the mixnet anonymous. So what we don't want is when I access the mixnet, I don't want to dox myself. I don't want to reveal myself by allowing there to be correlation between me paying for the mixnet using a credit card or NIM token or whatever versus my access to the actual mixnet itself. So what ZK NIMs are is they're what's called an anonymous credential system. For those of you that work on self-sovereign identity, it's sort of the opposite of self-sovereign identity. Self-sovereign identity says, I believe you should have a unique identifier, and you can share that unique identifier across all these different applications. But remember, we're a privacy project, and you don't really need all these unique identifiers, because unique identifiers essentially can be used to track you. So what we say is, we're not interested in your ID. We're interested in, have you paid to access this VPN? Have you paid to access the mixnet? Are you from a sanctioned country? Are you over 18? Whatever. We're interested in these kinds of questions. And these kinds of questions are answered better by this technology, also invented by David Chaum. David Chaum invented mixnets, called anonymous credentials. They allow you to selectively disclose attributes about yourself. They allow private transactions. And while the original anonymous credentials from Chaum were centralized, we have decentralized them. And the way we've decentralized them is we've actually taken advantage of some cool features of Cosmos. So if I'm running a self-sovereign Cosmos chain, the wonderful thing is the validators, they sign blocks, but they can also do extra work. So one of the problems with L2s on Ethereum is if your chain wants to have the validators do something complicated in addition to just signing blocks, you can't make them do it, right? So the reason why we at NIM chose Cosmos to be our infrastructure is because our validators don't just sign blocks, they do an extra bit of zero-knowledge computation, which lets people build these anonymous credentials, which we call ZK-NIMs. So how an anonymous credential works is there's a user, they want a credential, maybe they want their name, maybe they want their nationality, maybe they want the amount of NIM they paid or that's in their wallet, and they can take any combination of anything they want about themselves, and they can authorize it both in clear text or in zero knowledge to the Cosmos validators running the Nix chain. And these validators do something called blind issuance. So they can issue a credential then back to you saying, yes, I checked, maybe they checked your ID or someone else checked your ID, and they can essentially give you this cryptographic credential back, and then you re-randomize the credential. For those of you who are cryptographers, it's just taking the credential to an additional exponent. And this re-randomization, taking a credential, which is again a bunch of zeros and ones, and randomizing it, essentially makes that credential unlinkable to the communication with the validators, because it doesn't look anything like the previous credential. And then you give the credential to a verifier, and the verifier can determine, are you from a sanctioned country? How much have you paid? So forth and so on. And this provides a very cool cryptographic attribute called unforgeability. So essentially, a user cannot produce a credential that they can then display privately or anonymously to someone unless they satisfy the access control policy, and that access control policy has been checked by the validators or other third parties that then the validators can know about and can verify. So we think this is quite a nice scheme, but the problem historically with this scheme is, again, that it's centralized. There's a central kind of validator that runs this scheme. So what we've done is we decentralized it. So a user who wants to do some private transaction on Cosmos, we're particularly interested in paying for the VPN or the mixnet. What they do is they talk to multiple validators independently, and they get a bunch of what's called credential shares. These are partial credentials, and they're signed by the validators. Once they've gone over a threshold, which in our system is the same as Tendermint, 2/3 plus 1, once they've gone over that threshold, they can basically then take the credentials and merge them into a valid credential, and then do that trick. Again, the re-randomization trick is really important. And when they re-randomize the credential, which they do locally on their computer, so they merge the credentials locally and re-randomize it locally, they get a credential they can then use. So this is pretty cool because the original paper by David Chaum was called identification. It was called, I think, what was it? Security without identification. Essentially, that we can provide all of the features that you need to access systems verified by third parties. This is things like OAuth or OpenID or Facebook Connect or Google, sign in with Google or whatever Injective is doing. We can provide all of these features that you need to access services, including a VPN. That's our particular use case. But rather than giving away all your identity information, you can do it all in zero knowledge and in a decentralized manner. And we think this is pretty fantastic tech. It's much easier to program against than traditional zero-knowledge computing. Again, there's no real circuits you have to design. It's quite fast. These credential shows or re-memorizations, they take milliseconds. And the way you want to think about, well, how did we make it so fast? We've made it fast because the trust assumptions have been moved away from the verifier and the prover, the client and the app, let's say, and they've been moved to the validators because we have these Cosmos validators that are just kind of hanging out online anyway, signing blocks. So we say, well, this is a great match for the trust assumptions of our zero-knowledge system. We just have the validators do a bit of extra work, and then users can get these very high-speed anonymous authentication credentials that, again, take milliseconds to produce and to use, and they don't require everything to be written on chain. Most of the activity is off-chain, except a double spending check. So we think it's kind of like an obvious and easy solution for privacy. Interestingly enough, this is also a centralized version of this scheme, is more or less what Switzerland and to some extent possibly the EU are proposing for their somewhat sketchy CBDCs. So how are we different than a normal Cosmos blockchain? Again, we have our unique zero-knowledge system, ZK NIMS, which is particularly useful for paying things or anything that could involve a kind of JSON array. Could be used for private voting contracts, whatever, lots of other different things. And again, we have a bunch of validators, and we've been running this Cosmos chain, including IBC with Gravity Bridge. I think we're the largest user of Gravity Bridge out there, for about 2 to 3 years now. So the chain's quite battle-tested and has a pretty good validator set. And this is the current validator set. So you can see a lot of validators you might know, P2P, some people from the Cosmos community like Komodim and Blockfin, Testnet Run from Turkey, who are absolutely amazing. I had a great to see anyone from Testnet Run in the audience. Swiss Staking, that's Swisscom, I think, behind them, Figment, Nodes Guru, so forth and so on. So you can see we have a bunch of validators running already, but our problem has been that, oh, sorry, let me go back. While we were basically building this blockchain, we essentially was working by quote-unquote proof of authority. Essentially, it was permissioned because all the zero-knowledge tech was still in development. And because we needed to debug it quickly, we didn't want to have a giant group of validators to slow things down. Now that the zero-knowledge tech, which is currently on testnet, is going to mainnet, we'd be happy to get people to join us as validators. So the NIM token, it exists. It has value. We will reward the validators from about half of the reward pool, the other half going to the mixed nodes. And we want people to be able to join in a permissionless fashion. So they'll get this thing called a NIX token, and this NIX token will be redeemable for a certain amount of NIM. And essentially, as a validator for NIX, you have to run not just a standard GaiaD Cosmos setup, but you have to run our NIM API, which isn't that hard. Again, you're just doing a little bit of zero-knowledge work, some digital signatures, running a distributed key generation protocol every so often. And then you basically get NIM tokens from the inflationary pool and from real usage when the VPN product probably takes off, we hope, later this year. And then in the long term, thanks to a grant from Interchain we received quite a while ago, we are getting ready to package up this technology, and we'll eventually try to ship it as part of the Cosmos SDK to other chains. So if you're interested in running a validator or getting involved in the NIX blockchain, and if you're interested in privacy in particular, we have a booth. Just come to the booth. I'll be there after this talk, and we'll also, or just send us an email, and we will get back to you. So that's it. That's all of our contact info. You're more than welcome to check out our GitHub. We are, I think, the third most active project in terms right after Osmosis and Atom in terms of actual commits and activity in the kind of general Cosmos ecosystem. And we want people to know that we're using Cosmos and we're having a great time with it. And we want to see more of the Cosmos community really get involved in helping privacy. And if your chain is doing some privacy technology, you're doing something cool with zero knowledge, we're not going to force you to use our technology. Again, we're building a kind of modular network stack with a modular ZK stack. We're happy to work with anyone, so we're hoping that we can integrate in the not-so-distant future, again, Secret, Namada, and hopefully your particular favorite Cosmos chain. So thanks so much.